Luminoso started out of the MIT Media Lab as a project to determine whether computers could understand or learn language like a human. Daylight learns what things mean based on how they're used in context, on how things are used synonymously or in conjunction with each other. That builds the models that allows it to be dynamic and domain-agnostic, because it learns as it goes. If you haven't logged into Daylight, you signed up for the trial, you should have an email from provisioning@luminoso.com with a link to create your password. Go to daylight.luminoso.com/login.html. Password doesn't expire, but the link to create the password does. If you haven't logged into Daylight in a while and you forgot your password, click the forgot password link. It'll trigger a new email from provisioning so you can set up something new. So you should be able to log in. Welcome everyone, my name is Kim Larson. The things we'll be going over today are in three primary workflow components. One, getting data in. We'll cover what kind of data is good for Daylight, doing your analysis, so the navigation of the Daylight platform, and then finally sharing your findings. What kind of visuals can you produce from Daylight, and where do you go from there? Because we know that insights are only the beginning. You want to be able to act on the data that you have. The new features that we'll be covering, if you haven't logged into Daylight in a while or haven't seen Daylight in a while, include data streaming. That is a new way to get data in. We now have Helios with the generative AI chatbot boosts, where it is able to distill some of the findings to give you some really quick insights even faster. And then in the presentation side of things, we now have dashboards. The dashboards are evolving very, very quickly. So we're not going to go in depth in that today. My recommendation for the dashboards would be click around, play around, and do it frequently because it is changing a lot, and we will have a lot to cover just on the data streaming and functionality components so far today. From here, let's start with getting data in. The data that we want to include in Daylight tends to lean more towards the storyful text. We'll touch more on what deep text looks like. I believe next month, we'll be talking about deep versus dynamic text. For Daylight, we're looking for storyful text, that rich people trying to explain things to another person, whether it is support tickets or survey essay responses or Reddit threads. We're looking for things where people are trying to explain things to one another. So we can access that with the new data stream button at the top right of your project list page when you log in. The types of sites that we can source are social media like Reddit. Like this is a Reddit thread. What is the single scientific discovery you want to see most in your lifetime? People responded with stories. They want to see space things, medical things, ocean things. People explaining what they want to see and why. Review sites. These are also very storyful. The thing arrived, it was broken, but the flavor was good, whatever it was. People are telling a story to help inform someone else of another experience they had. Review sites can also include Google Maps reviews. So if you're taking a tour of a new city, if you want to check out a regional retail scene or a restaurant scene to see what people like, what people don't like in a given space, Google Reviews is a great resource for that we can stream directly into Daylight. And you can also upload your own data. So you can either click on New Project at the top right or upload more data to an existing project with the links available. Surveys are a super common source of data for Daylight. We recently we often harp on the St. John's Portland neighborhood study with a bunch of storyful questions there. Surveys are a great source of storyful text because you have control over the questions that are asked. These can be retail, these can be community, these can be HR. Wherever you're doing surveys for storyful data, can be a great source for Daylight. And we can also work with transcripts. If you want to see a researcher's guide to transcripts, we have that recording on YouTube. And we also have the advanced qualitative research webinar on how do you convert the focus group style conversation into a Daylight project, which would allow you to increase the scale. So instead of having a focus group with a dozen people, how do you expand that to hundreds of people or thousands of people, getting that storyful feedback? When you upload your data, when you click on that green button for the new project, you will see a screen. You can drag and drop your Excel file with the first row of headers, and it should generally auto-detect what type of field it is, and you can see the progress bar at the top to see how many documents you've uploaded. Once your project has been created, you will come to the highlights page. The highlights page is the "Did the AI read my data?" before we go into the specific features. On the left, we have the feature nav bar. The highlights is "Did the AI read my data?" On the left, the tiles are what was said. So how often were things mentioned, either explicitly or with the conceptual matches, and the themes, or what was related to what. So there may be a few examples of people saying decades in this data set, but there's also a lot of conceptual matches related to time. Years, millennia, those may be conceptual matches for decades, and you can choose how specific do you want to get. For things like descriptions like loved, there's a infinite number of ways that people can describe their appreciation for something, in which case you would probably want to include those conceptual matches. The clusters of conversation, the terms that are used synonymously or in conjunction with each other. In this case, in this data set, we have warming, temperature, global warming, and decades being used in similar parts of the conversation, whereas quantum, space-time, math, and singularity are being talked about together in a different part of the conversation. On the right, we have the so what. So if you have a business application or a use case where you're working with scores or like needing drivers or concept level sentiment, that is focused more on the right side. Customer support is a really classic use case of they will be associated with lower scores, but the sentiment can go either way. You can have phenomenal customer support experience, or they can contribute to the problem depending on how time consuming that phone tree is. And then we've recently, within the last year, added a what if. So if you need more control over your data, you're working with data sources that are not optimized for daylight, but you need to do some changes to make the analysis more streamlined. We now have that option at the bottom left. Another new option that we have, or new functionality that we have, is Helios. We're excited. We talked about it back in January. We're excited to have this additional functionality to check your work, do summaries, and all the capabilities that we have there. So if you have created a project, in the bottom right, you should see a little AI circle button. And when you click on that, a text box will come up. You'll want to click Build Helios Data. That will run in the background while we go through the next steps. We can take advantage of that in a little bit. Once that has run, there is a Helios summary tile at the bottom left where it can generate a one-off summary that describes what is in that data. And it will tell you how focused or expansive that data is. In this case, for our trip to Seattle from Google Maps, the Helios summary was able to detect, yeah, I'm into space today. I'm into exploring galaxy and seeing what the planes and the space plane stuff is up to. It does regenerate every time. So if you're not happy with the first summary, leave the project, come back, it'll reboot, and it'll give you a different version of it, at least at the moment. So one of the things that we're always looking for is feedback. So depending on what you need or what you like about these summaries and how you think these should be integrated, Satoshi, John, and I are eager for your feedback so that we can help make sure this product serves you better. If the project has been built, there is the AI assistant where you can ask it specific questions related to the data. In the St. John's neighborhood data, I just asked it the same questions that I asked my respondents in the survey, and it summarized it for each of our 10-ish questions. In this example, we have what advice do reviewers have regarding visiting the Space Needle, and it tells us when to visit, how to avoid the crowds and heat, what kind of city pass to get, and it's pulling that directly from the data that we uploaded. Other features, we can go directly into volume. This is where we track how often things were mentioned, and we can cut it by whatever metadata you have available. So if we want to view it by segment or gender or age or department, whatever metadata you have, you can dive into those subsets in the data. We have Galaxy, so what topics are related to what, and the word cloud visualization for that. Drivers is a scatter plot graph to see if someone mentioned X, on average, what was the value for that driver. So overall score, that kind of thing. And then sentiment, when they mentioned X, in what context was it described? If they mentioned customer support, was that in a positive light or was that in a negative light? And dashboards, the new functionality where you can see side by side for different segments, or if you're diving into a specific topic, how many ways can you evaluate it at once? There's just a lot of new capabilities available with dashboard. And then project management for folks who really like to get in the weeds with those what if questions on what if there are spelling errors? What if the brand name comes up and I don't want to see that? For folks who want to optimize their data. Okay, so that piped your data in. We now have an idea of what to expect from Daylight. How do we start our analysis?